The air over Bagram shimmered with heat, the kind that made the horizon waver like a mirage. On the tarmac, Colonel Mason paced with sharp, clipped steps, his voice cutting through the air like steel. The order had been simple, almost careless. Any jet will do. But in war, nothing is careless. And when the deep, growling hum of twin turbofan engines rose from beyond the ridgeline, his pacing stopped. An A-10 Thunderbolt was coming in fast. And at its controls was the one pilot he thought he'd never see again. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love knowing who's listening. Captain Elise Hartman had been gone for 9 months. Shot down over hostile territory, presumed dead, her name had been quietly folded into the shadows of the missing reports. Mason had signed the condolence letter himself. And yet, here she was, flying that slow, stubborn, ugly beautiful beast of a jet that could take a beating and still come home. The sound hit first, a deep, steady rumble that made the ground vibrate. Soldiers on the flight line turned their heads, shading their eyes. A murmur passed through the ranks, like wind through dry grass. Some whispered her name. Others dared not. Mason's jaw clenched as the A-10's silhouette grew larger, its wings tipped with missiles, its nose-mounted cannon a silent threat. For Elise, every second of the approach felt like a lifetime. She could see the base below, the familiar pattern of concrete and dust. But she also saw the faces from the village she'd been hiding in. The family who had fed her, sheltered her, risked everything to get her to the extraction point. She thought she'd never see her unit again. She was wrong. The A-10 touched down hard, tires screaming, a puff of dust curling up behind. Elise's hands trembled as she guided it to a stop. The canopy hissed open, and sunlight flooded in. For a moment, she didn't move. She just breathed, in, out, and let the heat and the smell of jet fuel remind her she was alive. Mason was the first to step forward, though his boots felt heavier with each stride. He wanted to be angry. He wanted to demand answers. But beneath the rigid posture, something else burned, guilt. He'd given up on her. Around them, the air felt electric. Soldiers who had faced firefights without blinking now stood frozen. One sergeant muttered, "That's Hartman, it can't be." Another just crossed himself quietly. When Elise climbed down, her movements were deliberate, as if the ground itself might vanish beneath her. Her flight suit hung looser than before. The sun had etched faint lines around her eyes. But her gaze was unbroken steel. "You said any jet will do, Colonel," she said softly, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "So I brought you one that doesn't quit." The words hung there, heavier than gunfire. Mason's reply came slowly. "I thought you were gone." "I was," she admitted. "But not everyone lets go that easily." Her eyes flicked to the cluster of soldiers watching, then back to him. "Sometimes you fight to come home. And sometimes home fights for you." He wanted to salute. Instead, he stepped aside, letting the crowd close in. There was no roar of applause, just a wave of quiet respect, hands touching her shoulder. Nods that said you made it, a sergeant whispering, "Welcome back, ma'am." But war doesn't pause for reunions. Hours later, Mason found himself watching her A-10 take off again, heading into the mountains on a close support run for a pinned-down platoon. Every move she made in that cockpit was poetry written in defiance. And as she banked toward the horizon, he realized he had underestimated not just her, but the will to endure, because courage doesn't vanish, it waits. And it finds its way back. And somewhere in the wavering heat above the runway, the moment replayed. A single jet breaking the horizon, carrying a ghost who refused to stay dead, and a truth too heavy to ignore. If stories like this move you, subscribe. And share this one with someone who believes in fighting their way home. And tell me in the comments, if you had one shot to come back, who would you come back for?